How's everybody doing today? So I'm going to try and reshoot this video because the first one just ended up a mess. I want to talk about the Ohio gubernatorial race. I chose this race kind of at random out of a pool of races that I want to talk about, but I didn't really know what order that I wanted to talk about them in. So in this particular race, we have a race for the current seat of John Kasich, who some of you may have remembered from the 2016 Republican primary, where he was somewhat handily taken apart by Donald Trump, as were the rest of the Republican primary contenders. And Mr. Kasich, Governor Kasich, is term limited, so he cannot run again. So this has led to a race between his Attorney General, Mike DeWine, and Democratic challenger, Richard Cordray. Now, aside from their differences in political affiliation, they also have a little bit of a difference in rep. Mike DeWine's supporters are behind the fact that he has a good reputation for Ohio politics, knowing the situation in Ohio, representing Ohio. Like I said, he is their current Attorney General. He is a well-known and celebrated figure, at least amongst Republicans and some moderates in Ohio. However, Mr. DeWine has the somewhat dubious issue of that the current governor, the current Republican governor, John Kasich, has somewhat expressly refused to endorse him. He has said, and I quote, that he would be willing to vote for DeWine but not endorse him. Now, this actually goes back to the fact that DeWine, along with the Lieutenant Governor, Mary Taylor, went out of their way to endorse Trump and signal their differences with John Kasich during the 2016 primaries. So it might be kind of semantic that Kasich says that he's going to vote for DeWine but not endorse him, since kind of giving somebody your vote is in a sense an endorsement, but at the same time it's not, because the fact that he went out of his way to make that statement is something of a condemnation of Mike DeWine, even if it seems to be a condemnation born of a grudge, if nothing else, and maybe not actual political or positional differences. So there is a whole discussion that we could have about Trump Republicans versus more conventional Republicans, Kasich kind of falling into the latter category, whereas DeWine obviously seems to fall into the former category. But I don't think it really matters too much, because what I have noticed is that the country is so divided right now that even in the case where you have more traditional Republicans who typically might espouse issues with Trump Republicans, at the end of the day, they still seem to, at least in polling, be coming out heavily in favor of those Trump Republicans because they would rather side with them than the Democrats. Now, Richard Cordray seems to have the opposite pros and cons of Mike DeWine, because detractors of Richard Cordray say that he does not have the experience or rep in Ohio politics to serve as the governor of the state, and that maybe he doesn't necessarily have the interests of the Ohio people at heart, or at least is not exemplified that he has the interests of the Ohio people at heart. However, he does have a huge resounding endorsement, that being the endorsement of former President Barack Obama, for whom he served as Obama's appointed director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Obama has even gone so far as to come out and headline a rally for Mr. Cordray in Cleveland, which definitely, I think, will go a long way to pulling at least Democratic voters strongly behind Cordray, and maybe also pulling in some independents and moderates who had previously voted for Obama and supported Obama in the past, and maybe aren't so happy with the Trump administration. Now, if we actually look at the polls, the picture seems to be slightly in favor of Richard Cordray. Give me a second to pull up the polls here. Now again, Ohio is a smaller state, which gives me a smaller pool of polling data to look at, but in two June polls, which ended respectively on June 12th and June 11th, Quinnipiac puts Cordray ahead by 2 points, 42 to 40, and Suffolk puts Cordray ahead by 7 points, 43 to 36. In a much more recent poll, which ended September 20th, NBC News puts the race at a dead tie, 47 to 47. And if we want to go way, way back in time, at least as far as polling data is concerned, all the way back in March, WOIO-TV put DeWine ahead of Cordray 47 to 39. That's an 8-point margin, but take that with a huge grain of salt because that poll would have been conducted well before there was any idea who the nominees would have been from each side, and at the very best there would have been conjecture. So with that in mind, I have dropped that poll from the aggregated result, both because of the age of it as well as the fact that I don't know anything about this local news station, so I don't really want to put any stake in them because I cannot verify their legitimacy or their nonpartisanship. And I probably wouldn't count the poll even under the best of circumstances because it's just so damn old. That gives us an aggregated polling result of 3 points advantage for Cordray, 44 to 41. However, let us also acknowledge the fact that the margin of error on the most accurate poll here is 3.7 points, which puts the difference between these two candidates within the margin of error of all of these polls. So, with all of that being said, and with the understanding that this is a lot shorter than most of the election overview videos that I have done so far, actually coming in probably after editing at about half the time. My personal estimation of this race, I'm going to say there is a 70% chance Richard Cordray comes out ahead. Now, my main reason for coming to this conclusion, I do put a little bit of weight in the fact that he has a slight advantage in the polling data, but the bigger reason I come to this conclusion is his having and Mr. DeWine lacking the support from their larger party as a whole. Kasich's backhanded condemnation of DeWine, or I should say his backhanded support of DeWine, saying that he will vote for but not endorse him, combined with the fact that Obama has gone so far out of his way to support Cordray, I think will probably be what tips this race in the favor of Cordray on election day. Furthermore, there's a lot to be said for the fact that Ohio is definitely a swing state, and again, this is something I've talked about more in overview videos, but there is an overall Democratic momentum in this election, as is typical of the party who does not control the White House, especially if they don't also control the Senate and Congress in a midterm election year. And I think all of these factors combined makes it pretty likely that Cordray will come out ahead in this race. So that's all I wanted to say about that. You guys have a great night. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment in the comments section, especially if you're from Ohio, and let me know any insights you have into this race or your personal opinions on it. Any additional information you'd like to add about either of the candidates. And I'll see you in the next video.